Hello, everybody. We're the Jocks of All Trades podcast. Thank you for joining us for another Friday of Smashed Popcorn, the movie review show that's kind of random and we kind of go off on tangents, but that's what makes movies so great. We are joined once again by a good friend of mine, Billy, friend of this podcast, also a podcaster as well. Billy, do you want to give a small rundown of who you are and your podcast?
Absolutely. Hey, everybody. My name is Billy Martell. I am the co-host of a podcast called 1000 Wives of Weird, where we discuss weird movies from every corner of the world. We're actually just in the middle of our first theme month with the show called No, Not That One Month, where we talk about weird movies that have the same title of much better known movies that you've actually heard of. The 2 episodes of it are out so far are talking about Casino Royale, not the Daniel Craig one, but the 1967 David Niven one, and talking about Tag, but not the one with Ed Helms, but the one directed by Japanese auteur Shion Sono, which is now one of my favorite movies I've ever seen. Coming up in the upcoming weeks, we're going to be talking about Up, but not the Disney one, the softcore 70s thing that is not one of my favorite things that I've ever seen, and Matilda, not the fun one, but the really not fun one. So yeah, it's a great time. It's a great show, and we really enjoy doing it. And in the middle of the day today, Brad was just sort of like, "Hey, I forgot to ask you, do you want to record a podcast tonight?" And I was like, "Sure." Why not? And here I am talking about a far more mainstream movie than we usually get to talk about on my show. So this is a big change of this is a pretty fun change of pace for me.
Right. Speaking of which, let us go ahead and tell you what that movie is going to be, and then we'll dive in with The Prestige. Hang on for one sec. Okay, so The Prestige by Christopher Nolan. This was released in 2006. This is after Batman Begins. For those of you that are fans of the Dark Knight trilogy, this would have been like right on the cusp of that movie coming out. But before, what is it? The Dark Knight with
The Dark Knight.
Joker would have been the second one. Okay, good, because Returns is okay. Gotcha. We got it. My brain is somewhat here. So this film is bizarre. I guess the best way to start is, it reminds me of some of his later movies now that they've come out. It reminds me of Tenet. Tenet's got weird time stuff. It reminds me of Inception. Inception's got weird time stuff. But I think this was the first one where he's like, let me really screw with the audience for 2 hours. Anyone else get that at all?
Yeah. If you watch Memento, which we talked about before we got on this podcast, it came out in 2000. That one was like really his first, like, what the is going on here? Or The Following, was that also weird? That was before Memento.
Following his very first movie told both the end of the story and the beginning of the story concurrently. So Christopher Nolan is a bit of a one-trick pony, honestly. He has one trick, and that is, but it's not in the order you expected it to be.
Yeah.
And he plays that one note as hard as he can, as often as he can. But that is his whole thing. The very first thing that he did to get studios interested in his work was mess with time. He immediately did it with Memento again, and then did it again. And even his Batman movies, which are much more straightforward, are still like playing with that sort of time frame with like, oh, he's at the temple, but now he's talking about his childhood, but now he's like fighting the guy, and like, but who was Ra's al Ghul anyways? It's pronounced Ra's al Ghul, but in the movie they say Ra's al Ghul. Never mind.
Yeah. I have to laugh too, because I can just imagine that when the last 5 years came out, Christopher Nolan was at every 7:00 showing saying, finally, someone gets it. This is perfect. This is exactly how movies should be. You know, like I watched this and all I could think was the last 5 years because it's the same thing. It's let's tell a story this way, converge, and then keep going. And that's almost what he does here. He gave us the end at the beginning. And I forgot because it's been so long since I've seen it. And I was like, isn't this the ending? Flashback. Oh, stop. Like just, go in order. Because I was still like watching it again. Kyle and I were chatting a little bit before we were recording and before you got here. There are things that just went for me this time that I didn't get the first time. So I guess now would be a good time to start talking spoilers because this whole movie is just an entire spoiler. So here it is. Do not listen past this point if you have not watched The Prestige.
Shields up.
It's long, so you have plenty of time to leave. So let's go ahead and chat here. Where do we even start with this? How would you like to start talking about what occurs in this film?
Well, you're going to start with the 3 acts of this film, which is the pledge. The magician shows you something ordinary, and then the second act is called the turn, when the magician takes this something and makes it weird. You're not sure what's going on. And then the third is the prestige, like when it comes back and you're like, oh, how did that happen? You know? And I feel like this movie is that whole thing. It really just distracts you. You know, you're like, when you first watch this movie, when I first watched it, I didn't notice that Christian Bale was also the other guy, his brother. Like, because I was just distracted by everything. And there is a lot jumping back and forth, like the whole time thing. Like he uses that to his advantage because you're trying to keep up with the movie that you just don't even notice people's faces. But like watching it again, I'm like, oh crap, like how did I not realize that was him? You know, because like I've watched it before. So it plays really well on that. And I would agree that that is his big trick. But for me, when I watch his movies again, I still get like a little confused. Like, even though I know there's so many twists and turns and time jumps, like he still confuses me, even though like I've seen it. And that's, I guess it doesn't make a good movie is because you're confused, but I think it's just all of it with the confusion, with the time jumps, because he really does bring a lot out of his actors. I think in all of his movies, his actors are tremendous and they're well cast. So like, I think that's kind of what keeps you in the movie, keeps you going, is just the performances as well. So
I think that so the biggest spoiler of not maybe the biggest, the biggest, because the other spoiler is telegraphed pretty far in advance. They're like two big twists at the very end of the movie. The one is much more telegraphed than the other. The Christian Bale twist is that Christian Bale has been 2 people the entire time, 2 twin brothers, and one of them is always the Christian Bale character, the magician. And the other, I know that they have names, but I just refer to these characters as Christian Bale and Hugh Jackman, because I'm not good at remembering movie character names anyway, and it's Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale. So one Christian Bale is the magician, and the other is his manager. And I think that, I know, because this is my 3rd time watching the movie. I know that the manager is also Christian Bale. But I'll be honest, I don't recognize him, and I don't when I rewatch the movie because the makeup is so good. Like there's a lot of good stuff in this movie. I think this might be one of, if not the best movie Christopher Nolan's ever made, for my money. But the part of that is because of the people that he surrounded this movie with. It wasn't just Christopher Nolan and his brother Jonathan Nolan who helped him write the script who made this movie. Like the costumes are on point, the makeup is on point, and it has Yeah, like you were saying, he has a good track record when it comes to getting good actors to be in his movies. I think this might have one of my favorite cast that he's ever assembled, because you not only do you have Christian Bale, you have Hugh Jackman. Christian Bale, Hugh Jackman is always very dependable. He's often making movies with terrible scripts, but he is always good no matter what he's in. Christian Bale is a bit more of a mixed bag for me. You either have like on Christian Bale or off Christian Bale. The Batman movies are off Christian Bale for me, but this movie is on Christian Bale, and he's fantastic in this essentially dual role. But you also have Michael Caine, who I don't think has ever given a bad performance. You have one of my favorite British character a lot of my favorite British character actors, actually. Roger Rees, that guy who played Professor Moriarty in Star Trek The Next Generation.
Yes.
And one of the most brilliant casting decisions of any movie ever, David Bowie playing Nikola Tesla.
Yeah.
So, and because this joke has been made 1,000 times and it needs to be made whenever anyone talks about this movie, yes, the plot of this film is essentially that Batman and Wolverine are having a wizard's duel while being assisted by Black Widow and the Goblin King from Labyrinth.
Yeah.
So, contractual obligation achieved.
And then Gollum shows up somewhere, and then messes with
and then well, Gollum, but also Alfred now.
Yeah, also
Yes.
Alfred. Yeah, yes.
As of this year, also Alfred.
Two Alfreds. Yes.
Do you know how many times?
Alfreds, two Alfreds.
I'd like to see that spinoff. You know how many times, though, the only thing that aged really poorly about this film was almost his casting choices in Bale and Michael Caine on the backs of Batman. So every time I watch this, I'm out of it for a little bit, because I'm like, well, this is Alfred and Bruce Wayne. You know what I mean? Like the way that he had that partnership too was the main guy and the guy that helps him like get it. It's the same thing. It's the main guy and Alfred being the guy that helped, so for a second you have to
Very
be
true.
like,
Well, in their defense, they do partner up Michael Caine with Hugh Jackman very quickly, and most of the movie it's them together, and not him
That's
with
true.
Christian Bale. So it almost, I don't know, maybe they were thinking the same thing that you were saying, because they did make this after Batman Begins. It was supposed to be made before, and then Batman Begins was like a train that wouldn't stop. So he's like, okay, I got to work on this, and I'll work on this in a second. But that's probably how Christian Bale and Michael Caine got in the movie at all, is because he was working on the other movie with them.
Batman.
And I talked to you this before, Brad. Like their chemistry in the Batman movies, I think, were some of the best parts of that.
Incredible.
And so, like, I think the chemistry just works here as well. I would say that Michael Caine in this movie reminds me of like Michael Caine when he's in Now You See Me, because in Now You See Me, also a magic movie, and he kind of led that whole charge for those guys. And it just messes my mind a little bit in that way. I'm like, wait, didn't you just do that? Oh wait, that's Now You See Me.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what Michael Caine's part in this movie reminds me of is weirdly Morgan Freeman.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Because this part in this movie is such a Morgan Freeman role. Like he even like when he goes to discuss the bless you when he goes to discuss the like the there's this part of the magic trick, and then there's this part of the magic trick, and then there's the prestige, because it's not enough to make someone disappear. You got to bring it back. That's you gotta to have the narration. That's the Morgan Freeman part, and he's always coming to give the main characters advice, like the whole like magical character archetype that Morgan Freeman's always cast as. Yeah. It's a very Morgan Freeman-esque part. They just decided to give it to Michael Caine this time. And I found that fascinating.
I was waiting for him to be like, and you have to bring it back, Master Bruce. Or like, so, just I was waiting for him to say Master Bruce like 1,000 times. However, I do have to piggyback on what you said. That
why do we make pigeons disappear, Master Bruce? So we can learn to make them appear again.
Reappear again. I love it. I have to admit, you're right. Bale by himself in this film would have sunk the prestige. But it's interesting that Hugh Jackman almost kind of brought the best out of Bale, because you know how we'll talk about foils of each other's characters. perfect even with just the actors.
Yeah.
Because they're so dynamically different that putting them together like that, you saw the sparks just beyond just the acting. It's perfect because they're very different. Like Bale is very methody, and Hugh Jackman is I would say kind of Meisner, a kind of a little bit of Jeff Goldblum in the terms of he just takes it for what it is and just goes. And that's why he comes across as Hugh Jackman in so many things instead of Wolverine, instead of where I'm going with that. But Bale on the other side is very methody. Like he has to like grit and grind into what he needs. So those two different opposing forces are just beautiful in performance.
Sorry, go ahead, Kyle.
I said I'm surprised like Christian Bale didn't actually cut off his own fingers in this movie, like the character.
Oh, right.
Just to get in the role. But you're right. Like you have to have like two like really, I think, well-known and I would say revered, well-loved actors going against each other. Like I was looking at some of the trivia here, and Jude Law was apparently up for one of those roles, but I do not think that would have worked at all. I just think
agree. I love Jude Law.
I like Jude Law too. I just don't think like head to head. Like to me, those are, knowing what I know now, those are two just powerful actors, and going head to head, I think just like really worked. And in the entire movie, they went head to head. And it's also another thing of this movie is like, who do you want to root for? Because I was kind of rooting for Hugh Jackman the entire movie, but in the end, Christian Bale was the one that like got the last laugh in a way. So,
but did he? Because they show Angier's body in the water container with the eyes like slightly moving. I'm like, oh, he's not dead. Like I am wondering. Like, okay, can we talk about the science behind this? Very interesting.
What science?
What science?
I just
with electricity going everywhere.
I just thought it was interesting. Well, that's what I was about to say. The Tesla thing that does it was interesting. They decided to use Tesla to make it more of a grounded magic trick instead of just like a Houdini like type thing. They could have done that, but they chose to go like a scientific route. And I was like, this is really interesting. Would it ever happen? Probably not. But having Andy Serkis working on it with David Bowie probably would happen because two very magical and fantastical actors. So sorry.
Anyways, they're creatures. Yeah, you're right.
They are.
You're right, and you should say it.
I just enjoyed that they tried to get that spin. I enjoyed the Edison and Tesla thing going on too. Like I kind of almost wanted more of that, but that's just like a history thing for me. But
it's a parallel of their competition.
Yes, I wrote that.
Yeah.
And that's what Nolan's known for too, is to make like science. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. He throws out some numbers, throws out some words, and you're like, oh, it's science. That makes sense. But in reality, it makes no sense. That's what he's always known for. Like it intrigues you in a way, but also you're like, that makes no sense, but I'll go along with it just because you put the word science in it. So
wait. In that case, I'm something of a scientist myself. Sorry.
Perfect.
That's just Christopher Nolan.
No.
There you go.
Yeah. No, it's science fiction, and so there's a trick to every Christopher Nolan movie, and that is that Christopher Nolan only makes movies about one thing, and that is making movies. He makes movies about making movies, and that's it. So no matter what he's offered, it ends up being about making movies on some level. Memento is a story about a guy creating a narrative for himself to follow and believe in because he doesn't like the reality of his world. He's telling himself a story that he can believe in that would have a happier ending and a more satisfying narrative than the narrative that he actually has in his life. Batman Begins and any of the Batman movies are all about the narratives that Bruce decides to tell the city about who Batman is. Because the Bruce Wayne in those movies is not the Bruce Wayne of the comics. It's just some guy who decides, I'm going to tell the story of Batman to the city. And he tells this story straight up to the point where in the third one, the ending that he tells Gotham about is not really the ending of that story, but it's an ending that works for the story he's told up to that point. And The Prestige is the same thing. It's when he's talking, like you said, Kyle, what you said about how this movie, when it describes the 3 steps of the magic trick, is describing the 3 acts of the film. It's doing more than that. It's telling you right off the bat, this movie is not about magic tricks. This movie is about making movies. And the movie repeatedly hammers into you that I love the meme. That's incredible. Okay. But yeah, so it's all right. But the movie hammers into you that Christian Bale is an artist. He's a real artist with natural talent and an incredible, artistry to his work. He's a real, whatever they are, filmmaker, magician. He's a real one. Hugh Jackman is not a real one. He doesn't have any of that sort of talent, training, whatever Christian Bale's got. He's rich, and he is untrained and very passionate. But he needs a lot more help from older people like Michael Caine than Christian Bale does, because Christian Bale also doesn't have the money to back up his shows, and he doesn't have the actual presentation talent necessary to really make the plebes appreciate his art for what it is. So Hugh Jackman just keeps on rolling, and then by the end of the film, Christian Bale has learned how to present his art in a way that the masses will eat up. Yep. And Hugh Jackman has learned how to, he hasn't actually learned how to be a real magician. He's just taken some stuff from Tesla, but he bought that stuff with his money, and he learns how to, and he presents it well, but he learns how to sacrifice for his art, like what the sacrifices are necessary in order to create something truly spectacular and unique. And in the end, both of them are monsters. Both of them are awful, which I love. I love that. Here's my frustration. Christopher Nolan likes Hugh Jackman better than Christian Bale. And you can tell this because at the end of the movie, despite the fact that, up until now, we've had this very close race of, who's the bigger asshole and who is right and who is wrong. Yeah. At the end of the movie, Hugh Jackman gets shot, but before he dies, he gets to deliver a final monologue in which the movie, and this might be entirely me. This might be me reading into shit. But the movie, to me, seems to be pointing at Hugh Jackman and saying he gets it. He's the real artist, even if you thought he wasn't, and the whole movie's been saying he wasn't. He is, because he got what was important: the audience. It was about making the audience like him. About making the look on their faces, as Hugh Jackman says. Yeah. And Christian Bale just wanted to show people how smart he was. What a dummy. and the reason why is because Christopher Nolan is rich. Christopher Nolan didn't go to film school. Christopher Nolan taught himself how to make movies, which is why he's also a very sloppy filmmaker and does a lot of editing tricks to disguise that. And he is the Hugh Jackman character, and Christian Bale are all the other filmmakers in Hollywood that he is jealous of, and is like, I'm more successful than them, but why am I not better than them? And then in the end, he's like, I am better than them because the audience is like me, and that pisses me off. As an art house cinema fan, that pisses me off. Yeah. But I also kind of agree with it, because it's like, yeah, no, absolutely. you were born into money. You were also richer than all these other people. You didn't have to go to film school because you had all these. His uncle is all, his entire family's in the entertainment industry, so they've all been his Michael Caine's helping him out the whole time. And yeah, he's fine. He's won. So just like Hugh Jackman wins a spiritual victory even though he dies.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that.
I'm glad someone does, because I feel like a total Scrooge right now.
Well, here's the thing. Like, I don't disagree with you that, like, there's a lot of people out there that don't entirely love his movies because they are kind of similar, and the film style just isn't really up to par with many other filmmakers. Personally, I'm like, if there's anybody that's 100% on the Christopher Nolan like fanboy list, it would be me. Like, I love mostly all of his movies, and like, obviously I know a lot of people, like my cousin, even like you, who just like kind of finds his movies kind of one dimensional. Like, I've always loved them. But back to the actual movie part, it's interesting that like in the very beginning of the movie, when the kid is watching Christian Bale's magic trick, and he's like, "Oh, where's his brother?" Like that was his brother, and he's like, "Oh, you're smart." But like that kind of played into the movie. Also, the one bird having died, just like the one brother dying, just like Hugh Jackman. It's like Hugh Jackman's one version of himself always has to die. Like, that might not be the most creative, but it is interesting watching this movie back and like looking at all those details, those hints early on. So
I'll tell you something about this, just as an extension of an olive branch, I guess, about this on this particular subject. Although you don't seem to be that foreshadowing. You don't seem to be that pissed off at me, which I appreciate. But like, just as like, here's my thing about this movie in particular. And any, actually, first my thing about any Christopher Nolan film, then my thing about this one in particular. When I was in college, when I was studying film in college, I was a huge Christopher Nolan fanboy, partially because I'm a huge Batman fan, like to an insane degree. And so
that means you'll come back to talk the Batman with us, right?
Sure, yeah, why not? Okay. But yeah, and at the time, Christopher Nolan was the guy who saved Batman, because Batman and Robin had come out before, and then he came in and he made these movies. As I have gotten older and I have learned more and more and more about film, the more I have noticed the holes in his filmmaking. And so I have to admit that part of my distaste for Christopher Nolan these days has less to do with him being, again, a sloppy filmmaker, which I do think that he is, and has a lot more to do with secondhand embarrassment about how long I simped for him before learning, like, oh, hey, there's a lot more interesting stuff out there, which is, why I now have a show where I try and emotionally and psychologically scar myself from week to week, trying to plumb the depths of the cinematic arts. But there's nothing wrong with liking a Christopher Nolan film. And I think that if I were a more mature person, I could separate this own personal axe I have to grind from the fact that his movies are hella entertaining. Yes. And if there's one bit of praise I can give to The Prestige, every bit of praise that I've given it so far, I've meant entirely. I have such an axe to grind with Christopher Nolan that, like, to a certain extent, even his Batman movies have like kind of soured for me. Although part of that is just Christian Bale's voice. But
yeah.
But like looking at The Prestige, there are definitely there are nits I can pick. There are plenty of nits I can pick.
For sure.
This movie's fucking great. This movie is so good. And it's so good, even I have to admit that it's good, and I'm being a jerk about this. So like, it's just, like I said, it's. I think it's one of. I haven't seen Memento in a long time. I think it's one of his best movies. It definitely has some issues. I do like what you were saying about like the fact that there are so many little sort of hints throughout the movie, both like actual clues and just sort of like the dialogue, sort of playing like, brothers.
Yeah.
I like that. That's kind of cute. I like that there are all these little bits and all these little hints that like there might be two of them. Stuff like that. I also find it interesting that if you watch the movie and you pay close attention, if you know the twists going in and you pay close attention, there is an arc to the Christian Bale characters and the way that they relate. Now, the arc itself is super simplistic. The arc is that one of them's good and one of them's bad. But that's still an arc. And to have that going on in the background and be readable to the audience upon a second and third viewing is great. Because one of the biggest things you have to do when you're constructing a twist is make sure that if I rewatch that movie a second time, the movie still makes sense. Mm-hmm. Does the whole thing make sense? Not really. But that doesn't matter. Like, it makes sense enough. And even the movie at the very end has Michael Caine saying, like, you have to fool him for just a second, just long enough until you're off that stage. And it's like, yeah, that's what the movie does. It fools me for exactly that 2 hours and 10 minutes. And then the minute the credits start rolling and that dumbass pop song starts playing, I'm like, hey, none of that made sense, but doesn't matter.
Yeah. So I will be either the squishmallow or the asshole here, depending on how anyone wants to view this. Because I love this movie. There are two movies that from Christopher Nolan that I absolutely adore, and having rewatched The Prestige, I'm like, okay, I am okay with Christopher Nolan. I don't love Christopher Nolan, but I'm okay with Christopher Nolan. And this is one of those things where I like to just disconnect. Like, I have those films where I'm like, I have to pound everything into the ground and I need to understand everything from a background. You know what I mean? Like, really deep dive and like, I got to know. This is not one of those. Like, I have to disconnect because it's so jarring that you cannot stay in it the whole time and say, oh, I know what's happening. No, because we go from year 1, year 27, year 23, and he does this. So I have to disconnect. So it makes me like it because I don't have to, think about it, at least with this one. It's just, oh, that was a good movie. And I think that's where Nolan gets his like sick kicks. Is he's like, don't think about my films. Or if you do, you'll be confused. Because my second favorite movie from Christopher Nolan, I had to watch it 3 times before I really started catching on. Tenet. I loved Tenet. I really did. Because it's mind-boggling. But again, it's one of those where I had to disconnect the first time because I'm like, what's happening? Who is this? Why are they here now? Who's the guy in the black? What happened here? Spoilers again. We already told you. Like, why are they going backwards? Why are they going forwards? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you cannot try to sit within it the whole time. Like, you have to break at some point and say, I can't do this. This is confusing. And then I start loving it because I'm like, okay, it's just these two magicians that are both like dicks going at each other. So I love it. And I just think my only thing that has this from being like a perfect film, at least for me, is it is so jarring that you can't enjoy it as okay, when did Sarah hang herself? When did Winscombe go back and forth? Like, was this early in their careers? Was this after they were along for a while? Even better, the last part where he announces his final 100 shows. How many shows did it take before he went up underneath to go check for, like, you know what I mean? Like, you don't know. It looks like it's his second show. Like, the jump in time is so disorienting that I kind of hate it. But you're right. There are illusions that are thrown throughout, I guess, both illusions and allusions. That I love both. Like, it's good, but it's not this deserves like all the awards. Like, it's a solid film. I'll give it a solid film. But he's made some that are just like, meh. Inception is great, and then as soon as you put on like let me think about this for a minute, it doesn't make any sense. Like that's one of those ones where I have a problem with Nolan. This is not one of the ones where I have a problem with Nolan.
See, I'm a little bit different because like the reason why I wouldn't give this a little bit of a higher score is like at the end there is like a finality there, really.
Yeah.
Christian Bale walk away with his daughter, Hugh Jackman's dead. I feel like that's pretty cut and dry. But a lot of his movies at the end are kind of like, what if, what about, like, how's he like, wait, what? And I feel like this would be the perfect movie to do that because it's about magic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, this would be the perfect movie to do that because
who's to say he got all the copies? That was my first thought at the end of the film. I was like, where's the other copy that's going to come out and shoot Bale? Like
exactly. Like, I feel like that whole Prestige moment really didn't quite happen. It felt a little bit flat to me at the end, So like that's kind of where I probably wouldn't give it the higher, the most perfect score. I feel like though, Brad, when you were talking about your favorite Nolan movies, mine's Interstellar, by the way. But that's one of the least confusing movies, which is interesting because the science in it probably doesn't make much sense, but in terms of like a story, like it's pretty much beginning to end and it's pretty cut and dry. And that's one of my favorite movies. So it's just weird how we kind of differ with Nolan, but I like it. So
let me throw one more thing in here. I had a brain buster for a second, and I think Billy saw it because he started laughing because I was like,
I was just laughing at the
over
faces
here, like
you were
freaking
making.
out.
Yeah.
How is it that they talk about what's the first one of the 3 acts in this? I know it's The Turn, then The Prestige. What's the first one?
The Pledge.
The Pledge. Okay, so we get The Pledge. We get that. Here's these 2 guys that both want to be the man in their city, in London. Sweet. That's awesome. Then we get The Turn, right? And we start talking about The Turn. The Turn is, they're going to keep attacking each other. And like, how is this going to go? And then, he's got this cool trick and he's got this cool trick. The Prestige should have been the end, but the end was more of The Turn. We never got the Prestige. We never got the aha. We never got that. We got too much of The Turn at the end. Like, it was too much M. Night Shyamalan and less, let me just explain with the Prestige part of this film. Maybe that's why it falls flat for a lot of people, is that Prestige moment never happens. It goes from the Pledge and The Turn, the entire film, there's no Prestige. Yeah. Or if there is, it's very brief and fleeting, and then we go back to The Turn.
I will say this movie is based on a book called The Prestige by Christopher Priest. And from what I understand, I do not remember what the twist is in the book, but the twist in the book, the twists that are in the movie are also in the book, but they are not the twist.
Oh.
Like the ending of there's a whole other level because in the book, the conceit is that you are following the children of these 2 men who have found their parents' journals and are reading through their experiences. And so stuff that's in the movie is in the book, but then there's a whole other side of everything as well that continues on into the future and to the future generations. So if you guys are looking for more of a twist, more like mind bendingness going on, that might be a good place to turn. Now, saying that a movie based on a book is not as good as the book it's based on is the oldest take in history. And I haven't actually read this book, so I'm not ready to say that. But I have heard that the book is much better than the movie. Again, to play devil's advocate, Christopher Priest himself said that he thought the movie was great. So just putting that out there. But that's, I mean, if you think that this movie is missing a layer, that's because it actually is.
Yes, yeah. So one thing that I want to have all 3 of us do, since we've all watched this multiple times now, I'm sure.
Yes.
This might be my 3rd, I think, total time watching it. Kyle, what is it for you? Like 2 or 3?
I think it's 4th. Yeah.
Okay, so we've watched it all a pretty good amount of times. Was there anything, and I love doing this with films, this is why I watch Star Wars religiously every single year, is I catch something different every time. Was there something that hit you differently this time?
Yeah,
I know, Kyle, you mentioned one, so go ahead and you can have that one.
We talked about it before, like when Christian Bale ties the knot for Hugh Jackman's wife who ends up dying, and then he goes to the funeral and he's like, did you know? And he's like, I really don't know. How could you not know? Well, it really could be Christian Bale not knowing because it was his brother that did the tie, maybe. You know what I mean? I never knew that the first 3 times I watched it. I'm like, he probably doesn't know. So,
well, did you catch the way that he phrased it too? He said, "I've asked myself that 100 times."
Oh.
They went back to his room and he literally asked himself, "What the fuck did you do?" And the guy didn't have an answer for him.
Yep.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love
No,
that.
I noticed that the second time I watched it, and it's great. This is the third time I watched it, and I think it was more like what I just said earlier, like that there is an arc for the two Christian Bale characters. One thing I just wanted to make sure that we mentioned before, and I don't know like how much more time we have, so I just want to make sure that this is mentioned. Hugh Jackman is incredible in this movie as the character that he's playing, the main character. I don't want this review to go by without mentioning how fucking incredible he is as Gerald Root, the drunken double that he finds in the bar.
Yes.
Which might be the greatest performance of Hugh Jackman's career
ever. Yeah, I'm on board with it. Yes.
Yeah. Mate. Chef's kiss, incredible.
Yes.
So that's my observation. I'll throw out. What about you, Brad?
If I may, here's exactly what you just said. Root is fucking rad. That's the phrase that you just said.
Root is rad. Root is rad.
So yeah,
what a radical root we have here.
Did you have anything that was new for you this time?
Christian Bale's arc in realizing that there's a bad brother and a good brother.
Yes.
The first two times obviously the first time I watched it, didn't know what the twist was. Second time I watched it, I knew the twist, but it was like hard for me to figure out which brother is which. And then this third time, I really got like an idea of like, oh, this one's this one, this one's that one. It's not clear in every scene, and there are definitely some bits where it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Like he does the transported man very early in the movie before he introduces it as part of his act on his date with his wife. Now it's a major plot point that there is one twin Christian Bale who is in love with his wife, and one twin Christian Bale who is not, and eventually falls in love with ScarJo.
Yeah.
But on their first date, because we know how the transported man works, this means one of him went on the date with his wife, his future wife at the time.
Right.
The other one was waiting in her apartment all evening.
Yes.
And then was just there and presumably had sex with her. And I'm just like...
Isn't that weird?
How
I noticed that too, because I was like, how did he get in her apartment? And then once you go back and you're like, he didn't. Like,
yeah,
it's like,
it makes sense.
So how is this part of, how is this? And I understand that he's like, oh, well, I have to live my act. How is this part of it?
Yeah.
How is that part of it for you? It seems like you're just having sex with a woman under false pretenses, which there's a 4-letter word for that. Starts with R.
Yes, there is. Yeah.
But like Hugh Jackman said, like to Scarlett Johansson, like that's his life. That's his entire life. And like, is it a stupid life? Probably, but like
that's a very stupid life. He's like, you think I like living like this?
Yeah.
Stop.
Yeah, stop doing it.
Yes, you do drama. He's like Darth Vader. They're all about the drama. Everything is about the drama. The thing that I wanted to point out, and Billy brought it up so early that I was just like, I'll just let you take it because it's exactly right. They want you to like, oh wow, I got sport mixed up there for a minute. I was about to say Hunter Renfrow. Wow, that should not have happened. Hugh Jackman. I'm getting there. My brain hurts. They want you to like Hugh Jackman so hard that I was like, okay, I want to actually pick at his character and see if there's actually like a point where he just like cracks, because we have to admit he is nuts. He is absolutely nuts by the end of this, because he's okay with killing someone just to prove a point. Like, bro, like he didn't even want his prestige. He was like, okay, bye. Like, whoa. It's actually at the death of his wife. And if you notice how he treats his wife in the beginning, he treats her as more of a magic trick than a wife. And I was like, oh, like just a prop. I was like, yeah. Like he kisses her leg, like stuff like that. Like, sure, that's cute. But he didn't ever care that she was going in the box. He didn't ever care that she would have potentially be in danger. Later, he goes on and says, if you're squeamish with anyone like drowning in here, this is not for you. This shouldn't be done. But he's okay with it when it was his wife. Like, does anyone else like that? The cognitive dissonance thing there that was just like, ooh, like.
One of the worst things about Christopher Nolan, and one of the things that made me turn on him as hard as I ended up doing, is when I realized that the guy is incapable of writing women. He just he does not know how to write women to save his life. I have not seen Interstellar or Tenet or anything after, what was that World War II one?
Oh, Dunkirk.
Dunkirk. I saw Dark Knight Rises, Dunkirk, and that's it. After everything before that, I've seen. Everything after that, nothing. I haven't seen anything. So at least in the movies that I have seen, anytime that there is a female character in them, they are either helpful robot or crazy bitch, and there's nothing in between.
No in between.
I would say Interstellar is the one that like actually had two very good ones. Anne Hathaway and Chastain. They were good.
Yeah, those are two great actresses who I love, but Rachel Dawes is such a non-character.
Maggie
it's
Gyllenhaal.
Actually funny.
Horrible.
It's actually funny.
Yeah.
I kind of liked Anne Hathaway as Catwoman. She wasn't written well, but I really like Anne Hathaway, so that helped.
Yeah.
But like the all of the women in this movie, like you're saying, they're just props. They're barely characters.
Yeah.
And he doesn't know what's creepy or what's not. So like again, that sequence where Christian Bale is suddenly in her apartment. First, he says like, "You think that door could keep me out?" And I'm like, Jesus. But of course, it's a movie. It's a movie. So she's like, you're charming. And I'm like, no, he's not. And then she goes in and he's just in there. And she's like, oh, you're so charming. And I'm like,
no,
he's not.
Yeah.
That's how Jack the Ripper got famous.
Yeah. So that's one of the worst things I would say about him creatively, is just that he can't write women, and in my opinion, and this is one of the things that turned me on him the worst, is if you can't write women, you just can't write. Like that's 50% of the goddamn planet. So like if you can't write 50% of the goddamn planet, you can't write. But again, not trying to be a dick, but succeeding nonetheless. I agree with that. But I guess my only point with all of that is that that is a problem with Hugh Jackman's character. I don't think Christopher Nolan sees it that way, because his female characters are props. So why wouldn't his characters treat them that way?
Scarlett Johansson, I think, asked him like, "Are you sad about your wife?" And he was like, "I don't give a damn about my wife." I'm like, "Holy crap!" Like, you know.
Well, that's supposed to be a hint at. Oh wait, no. Hugh Jackman says that. You're right. Yeah.
I'm like, geez. Like, I mean, I get that he's hell bent on revenge and proving otherwise, but like even a little bit more emotion about her. You know what I mean? Like, you're right. Like, there's not much. Yeah.
Even in that scene, though, he pulls back because he's like, I so desperately want my audience to like Hugh Jackman, that he makes. Hugh Jackman has that bit where in the story, as part of the story, he's supposed to be really going off the deep end here. I don't give a damn about my wife. The entire reason why this feud was started is bullshit. I don't care. But then he like immediately pulls back, and she's like, but I'll get in trouble. And he's like, you're right. I'll stage a robbery so that you won't be connected with it, because I'm a noble soul in the end.
Right.
It's just like he has to keep like, he's like, oh yeah, no, this story is supposedly about two people who are just nasty, but I have a favorite, and I need you to agree with me.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. So let's grade and do some quick trivia. We've kind of given why we both don't and do like it. Who wants to grade first?
Yeah, I'll give it a 8.9 out of 10. So that's nearly the lightsaber, but it's the One Ring. Love it, own it, should own it. I do own it. I probably wouldn't show my fiance this because she'd probably get confused because I get confused watching this movie and I've watched it 4 times. So yeah, it's very, very good. Always love watching it. I enjoy it every time I watch it. Yeah, solid 8.9.
I will let our guest go next. What did you have yours at, Billy?
I gave mine Ruby Slippers. It's 7.7. I think that's accurate. Yeah. Yeah, 7.7. I again, like, the movie is so good that it gets past my I think very reasonable critiques of the movie. But it's still great, and it shows that, like, Christopher Nolan, for all of my problems with him, does have some actual talent, and also the script is one of his better ones. The cast is possibly his best ever, and it just kind of shows you, like, how great art can sometimes come out of just, like, having a great number of incredibly talented people in the same room, just working together.
I did want to say that Nolan gets bailed out by his cast often, but that's a whole other discussion to have.
Yes.
So
he is Heath Ledger, but yes,
I'm gonna completely sideswipe you both here. I have it at a 9.1. I told you,
wow.
I really like this movie. I do, just because it's clever. It's a period piece. I'll take it. It's got Hugh Jackman, Michael Caine. Like, seriously, we've talked about the cast. It's got so many people that I can just watch. Even if I don't understand what's happening, I can just watch these people because I enjoy them. Which would give it the lightsaber. I think this is the first time we've had a lightsaber on our
I think so. Yeah.
Only because, and I told you, this is one of 2 films with Christopher Nolan that I absolutely adore, and I'm just going to give it a good rating because I'm stubborn. So there's that.
What's the other one?
What's the other? What's the highest?
What's the other Nolan film that you're obsessed with? You may have already mentioned it.
Tenet.
Oh, right. Okay. Again, haven't seen it, but I'm sure it's great.
You should. Okay, so let's hit some quick trivia. I saved a few that I thought were good. So the guy that's in the film, Chung Ling-soo, he was a real stage character created by William Ellsworth Robinson, a white man who disguised himself as a Chinese man to cash in on the audience's enthusiasm for the exotic. He lived as Chung, never broke character while in public. He died in March of 1918 when a bullet catch trick went wrong. He said, "My God, I've been shot." And those were both his last words and the first English he had spoken for 19 years.
What an incredibly 1800s story.
What I love it. I'm
absolutely iconically 1800s story that is.
Yes. So we've argued and said there's so many time jumps in this. In case you're wondering, there's 146 time jump cuts in this, which equals out to a time jump every minute of this movie almost. That's awful. Anyways, Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale both had to learn actual sleight of hand techniques. I thought that was pretty cool.
That's great.
Christian Bale cut off his own fingers, right?
Yes. When Andy Serkis gets introduced, he makes a reference to a magic trick in which one person guesses the item in the person's pocket. The same trick fooled Serkis's character Gollum in The Hobbit and Unexpected Journey. I was like, oh, that's clever. I like that.
I didn't even think about that. That's so good.
This is one of 2 Christopher Nolan movies in which the character has a 2-headed coin. Another allusion to twin brothers. Of course, we know the other one is Harvey Dent and The Dark Knight. We've talked about all the casting in here. They've been in a bunch of things. Here is one of my favorites. And I'm going to ask Billy because Kyle and I already know the answer to this. This is one of 2 movies that was released in the fall of 2006 that featured Hugh Jackman and Andy Serkis. The other movie was an animated DreamWorks film. Do you know what it was?
Flushed Away.
Yes. Yeah.
I did not know Andy Serkis was in Flushed Away, but I know that had Hugh Jackman in it. So that was a straight up guess.
The third movie of 2006 with Hugh Jackman was X-Men: The Last Stand. So he had an okay year with movies. And there's
he wasn't the bad part of that, to be fair to him. He was not the bad part of that movie.
No. And the last one we've talked about, Michael Caine and Andy Serkis both have played Alfred Pennyworth in Batman movies. That's all I have for trivia.
I got one more thing. The Illusionist also came out this year. It's actually a pretty good magic movie as well. I believe Edward Norton is in it and Jessica Biel.
The Hulk's in it?
And in that movie is Paul Giamatti.
Oh, I love Paul Giamatti. I do.
Who doesn't love Paul Giamatti?
I love him for Sam Adams. He's such a
probably Christopher Nolan. Christopher Nolan probably hates Paul Giamatti.
Probably.
Yeah. Creepy creeper probably doesn't like Paul Giamatti like a creep would.
You're right. Anyhow, this has been our review for The Prestige.
Well, I have one last bit of trivia for you before we close. In the movie, again, Christopher Nolan's films are always about filmmaking. I'm not making an allusion, like a criticism there. He's said so himself. They're always about filmmaking. Interestingly, Tesla, who is referred to as a wizard in this movie as an allusion to a biography that was written about him in I think the 70s or the 90s, is in competition with Edison in the film. Edison was not actually an inventor. He was a guy who owned a lot of patents to things and was good at hiring people for no money or next to no money to invent things for him. Mm-hmm. But he was also called the Wizard, the Wizard of Menlo Park or something like that. Mm-hmm. And he owned the patent to the filmmaking process in America for a number of years. Even though the process of making film was invented in other countries, he brought it to America and bought the patent immediately. He patented that entire process. So, and all these movies that were originally made are all stamped as being made by Edison. He made none of them. It's just his company. And the reason why Hollywood exists at all is because Edison was based in New York City. And in order to get away from him and his horribly manipulative and exploitative business practices, they move all the people who want to make movies without his control ran as far as they could to the other coast, to the middle of the desert in California, and started making cowboy movies because that's all that they had was sand.
Yeah.
So Hollywood started as the first independent movie company and is now turned into, the monster it was trying to kill. But, I thought that was fascinating.
That's crazy.
Cool.
I would have never, ever, ever known that. But so we can actually thank him for the films that we're watching. Fantastic.
Absolutely.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Edison, for being a dick and giving us good films. So, hey, I like it. Anyways, I will wrap us up. Thank you for watching our review of The Prestige. Billy, thank you for coming here. If you haven't watched or I guess it is listen to 1,000 Wives of Weird, I forgot you guys don't have video, which is okay. We'll get you there eventually because you guys are fun to be around. But thank you so much. This is definitely not safe for work. We're going to let people know that. But it's been a joy. I've had a great
sorry.
time.
This is what I bring. I bring horrible bile and degeneracy.
No, you're good. Well, thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next week.